Today on TimesCast.
Congress has now approved a compromise to reduce the deficit and avert a default that would have devastated our economy.
The long-negotiated debt bill has been signed into law, but decisions on the cuts are not over. Egypt's ousted president Hosni Mubarak goes on trial Wednesday.
Rarely, if ever, has a president been tried by his own people.
And 500,000 Somali children on the brink of starvation because of a devastating drought. Tyler Hicks on photographing their stories.
This compromise guarantees more than $2 trillion in deficit reduction. It's an important first step to ensuring that as a nation we live within our means.
The grand debt debate in Washington is now over. The Senate has passed the legislation. The president has now signed it into law. What the legislation does, in addition to raising the debt ceiling and averting a default, is set up a process by which the lawmakers over the next several months will try and cut an additional $1.5 trillion in government spending.
I think I can say with a high degree of confidence that there is now a framework to review that will ensure significant cuts in Washington spending.
In September, after lawmakers return from their August recess, the legislative leaders will appoint a new super committee made up of both Democrats and Republicans to try to put together the cuts that are required in the legislation. The fight to watch, however, whether or not revenue increases, read that tax increases, are also included. The Democrats and Mr. Obama are going to insist that some of the deficit reduction comes from new taxes on oil companies, big corporations, and wealthy individuals. Well, the Republicans are going to insist that those are not included in the package. If they can't reach a deal, the threat of automatic cuts to Medicare and social programs for the Democratic side and defense cuts on the Republican side, that threat will still be looming over the lawmakers when they are supposed to complete their work at the end of November.
On Wednesday, Egypt's former president Hosni Mubarak goes on trial, facing charges of corruption and ordering the killing of protesters.
One story has dominated the headlines in Egypt today. That's the trial of President Hosni Mubarak, who's due to appear in court tomorrow. It's a moment that Egyptians have long awaited since the overthrow of President Mubarak and the revolution that culminated in February with demonstrations of hundreds of thousands of people in Tahrir Square. His trial comes at a tense moment in Egypt where the revolution is unresolved and conflicting forces have sought leverage in trying to determine its outcome. The country has been ruled by a military council since February, but that military council has lost popularity amid a widespread perception that it's incompetent, that it doesn't have the will or the way to rule this country of more than 80 million. The trial of Mr. Mubarak is a seminal moment in the country. In fact, it's a seminal moment in the modern Middle East. Rarely, if ever, has a president been tried by his own people. Some comparisons might be made to Saddam Hussein, but of course he was captured by American forces that invaded the country. This is a far different spectacle. It's sending a message to other leaders in the Arab world. Leaders like Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, Bashar al-Assad in Syria, and Ali Abdullah Saleh in Yemen. Mr. Mubarak's trial is a sign of things that could come for them as well. In some ways, it may discourage them to relinquish power, to fight to the end, as leaders there have vowed. On the other hand, it could be a lesson to their successors, and to the successor in Egypt, that the excesses of power can only go on for so long.
And as Somalia faces its worst drought in 60 years, children struggle to survive.
This is Tyler Hicks. I'm a staff photographer for the New York Times, and I just returned from Mogadishu, Somalia, where I was covering the famine that's really had a hard impact on the civilian population. The condition for these people is so bad that they're actually streaming into Mogadishu, a city that is one of the most dangerous in the entire world, where there's active fighting going on. It says something about the condition of where they're coming from. Despite the conditions that these people are living under, there's a surprising responsiveness and understanding of having a camera in front of them, having their photograph taken. I really encountered very little objection from the people because really they've come there for help, and they in some way see the camera as a way of getting their condition shown in the outside world. Particularly the children are the ones that have been affected the most by this famine. At times I saw some of these children and I couldn't even tell if they were dead or alive. They were just so incredibly sick. They're vomiting, completely dehydrated, malnourished, The flies were just relentless. People are so poor, in fact, that the families didn't even have enough money to buy mosquito nets. There's one photograph that I took of this young child, very skinny, very sick, under this sheen of multicolored scarf that you kind of see through to the face. It was just very difficult to see some of these scenes. I've covered a lot of issues in Africa as well as all over the world, in Haiti, Afghanistan, and I've seen a lot of desperate people. This ranked among the worst that I've seen.